People often say that having a lot of money brings many troubles. In this world, there are those who spend money on very bizarre entertainments. For example, this man frequently drives around every night looking for girls, but not for fun. Just hearing the terrified screams is enough to know something horrific has happened. Afterward, he drops them in a desolate area with no clothes on. What will become of these girls? In the middle of a vast field, a woman is frantically screaming for help, unaware that a man is aiming at her from a distance. The woman starts to run, but the man immediately pulls the trigger and shoots her in the back. He then approaches the injured woman and finishes her off with a handgun. Afterward, he buries her to dispose of the body and takes her bracelet as a trophy, storing it in his wooden chest. At the airport, a beautiful girl named Diana is eagerly waiting for someone to pick her up. This is her first time in this area to start a new job. After a while, a man named Fred arrives to pick her up. It turns out that she had participated in and won a dance competition at a bar where Fred happened to see her talent. He invited her to come here for a job with a very attractive salary. However, what Diana did not expect was that this was actually a strip club. She immediately called her parents to ask for money to buy a plane ticket home. But it seemed this wasn't the first time Diana had gotten into trouble. Her parents refused to help and told her to find a way to solve it herself. Meanwhile, the club owner gave her money and told Fred to put more pressure on Diana to quickly accept the job. So he pulled her aside and said that if she didn't want to work there, she could return the plane ticket money and other expenses he had paid for. He didn't want to hear any more negotiations from her. With no other option, Diana reluctantly agreed and asked Fred to take her to her accommodation. Upon arrival, she discovered that she wouldn't be staying alone, but would have to share a room with another female colleague named Rita. Fred also kept Diana's identification documents, and before leaving, he warned her that he knew all the information about her family, so if she tried to run away, he would find them. That night, a prostitute standing by the roadside was picked up by a car. Shortly after, inside a house, her terrified screams echoed. The next day, Detective David checked the bulletin board with photos of recently missing girls in town. He reported to his boss, Tom, that there was a common factor among them. Most of the cases involved prostitutes. However, Tom told him not to focus too much on a case he wasn't assigned to. He suggested that maybe those women didn't make much money in this town, so they left for another place. Meanwhile, Diana started working at the club, but her salary was less than what was agreed upon. She confronted Fred about this, and he listed several unreasonable expenses that she had to cover. Before leaving, he told her that only fools rely on their salary for this job. To make more money, she would need to know how to earn tips from customers. As Diana was about to go back inside, an elderly woman suddenly appeared and asked if she had seen her daughter, who used to work there. Although Diana said she didn't know because she was new in town, the woman kept asking many questions, making Diana scared. Only when the security guard appeared did the woman leave. That night, Diana counted the money she had made over the past few days. When Rita returned and saw this, she advised her roommate that genuine dancing wouldn't earn much money. Rita suggested that Diana learn to do more tricks on stage. Hearing this made Diana think a lot. The next day, David and his wife visited their friend Kaylin, who was one of the wealthiest people in town. The house was filled with trophies from his hunting trips. Before they left, David noticed Kaylin's parked car, a white SUV. Inside the house, Kaylin showed off more of his hunting trophies, which turned out to be women's jewelry. Kaylin was indeed the one who hunted the girl in the field at the beginning of the movie. He began reminiscing about his hunts with a face full of delight. That night, Diana followed Rita's advice and performed more boldly on stage, which greatly excited the men, who kept throwing tips at her. However, the money was still not enough for Diana to pay off her debt to Fred and leave the place. She angrily smashed things in the dressing room. The club owner appeared and asked what was wrong, reminding her that she should not perform naked on stage because it was illegal. The club owner advised her that if she wanted to make extra money, she should entertain the clients after her shifts. After much contemplation, Diana decided to take the risk and follow his advice. She went around observing and then started a conversation with a man. Unfortunately, that man was Carlin. After talking for a while, they quickly left together. Since this was her first time doing this, Diana sat in the car but couldn't hide her nervousness. Kaylin noticed and immediately reassured her. However, the feelings of anxiety and guilt overwhelmed Diana, and she eventually decided she couldn't go through with it, and asked Carlin to let her out of the car. His face darkened, but he pulled over. Before leaving, Diana thanked him, but as soon as she opened the door to get out, Kaylin suddenly grabbed her from behind and choked her until she passed out. A while later, Diana's terrified screams echoed in Kaylin's house. The man quickly left the room where she was tied up and washed the blood off the pliers he had just used. The next morning, Diana woke up in a vast field with no clothes on. She cried in fear and looked around desperately for someone to help her. Diana slowly walked into a forest to avoid the sun, but then she saw Kaylin's silhouette. He was sitting by his plane, preparing his weapons. He gave a sinister smile and raised his crossbow, saying, "I'll give you 15 minutes to run." He then shot an arrow towards Diana, causing her to panic and run as fast as she could. No matter how she tried to hide, Kaylin could always find her. The reason was that Diana focused only on running and didn't notice the footprints she left behind. It was only when she was exhausted and stopped to rest that she realized this and tried to cover her tracks, but it was futile. A new plan suddenly came to her mind. Shortly after, Kaylin reached the riverbank and saw her footprints leading into the water. Diana had run in the river to avoid leaving tracks. She quickly returned to land and rested behind a tree. At that moment, a snake appeared and slithered towards her. She tried to slowly escape, but Kaylin appeared before her. As the snake was about to strike, Kaylin shot it dead. Diana quickly fled and hid in the tall grass. When Kaylin approached, Diana silently threw a rock into the river to divert his attention. When he turned away, she quickly ran to the other side of the river to hide. Kaylin could only mutter, "You're smarter than I thought." Elsewhere, Rita began to feel strange when her roommate didn't return the previous night. Diana's savings were still there, and Rita was sure something had happened to her. Later, Diana found an abandoned campsite and took a chance to call for help, but it was all in vain. Perhaps the campers had left long ago. Diana started digging and luckily found a loose-fitting t-shirt that could at least cover her body and her injured legs. Suddenly, everything went silent, alerting Diana that something was about to happen. A few minutes later, Kaylin appeared and immediately aimed his gun at Diana. She ran to a ravine and climbed up. Kaylin quickly followed. Diana, from above, dropped a rock on his head, causing him to collapse to the ground. Diana shouted angrily, "Die, you bastard!" Meanwhile, Rita went to the police station to report Diana's disappearance. However, the officer refused to search for her because she had not been missing for 48 hours yet. Frustrated, Rita left, but David called her back as he had overheard her report. While Diana was exhausted, she saw a smoke column in the distance and decided to risk running towards it. Unbeknownst to her, Kaylin was beginning to wake up. As she screamed for help, a man grabbed her, causing her to panic and run, hitting her head on a tree. The man and his 2 sons quickly checked on Diana, dressed her, and took her back to their camp. Meanwhile, David took Rita to the club, hoping to gather some information. The club's security guard mentioned seeing Diana leave with a man. Last night, the man was driving a white SUV. Upon hearing this, David immediately thought of Colin's car. After being brought back to the tent, Diana remained in a state of panic and couldn't speak. Seeing this, the father told his 2 sons that they had to help her, as their plane wouldn't arrive until the following afternoon. He decided to go to the nearest road to find help. Before leaving, he instructed his older son to run away with his younger brother immediately if any strangers appeared. Unbeknownst to them, Kaylin was nearby, silently observing. Back in town, David went to Colin's house but found no one there. He then noticed a locked room and decided to climb into the house to find the key. While surveying the surroundings, he noticed the wooden chest. Just as he was about to look inside, Tom appeared and pointed a gun at him. It turned out that a neighbor had called the police upon seeing an unfamiliar face. David explained that he was investigating Diana's case, but Tom scolded his subordinate, saying that Rita was not a respectable girl, and asking why David believed her. As the sun set, Diana began to doze off, but was startled awake by Kaylin's voice outside. He was talking to the 2 brothers, pretending to be surprised about Diana's situation. Kaylin then tried to convince them that he had a private plane and could quickly take her to the hospital. Inside, Diana was terrified and saw a small knife nearby. Despite Kaylin's efforts to persuade them, the older brother remained suspicious and refused to let him take Diana. Suddenly, gunshots rang out. Diana was in great pain when she saw the 2 brothers being killed. Kaylin checked the tent and discovered that Diana was gone. He left the gun behind and then dragged the 2 bodies away to dispose of them. Seizing the opportunity, Diana grabbed the gun and faced him directly. However, he showed no fear and even said that hunters always knew one rule: if you want the prey to appear, you must lure it with a bit of bait. Diana immediately pulled the trigger, but the gun was empty. Not only that, Kaylin wanted Diana to place her fingerprints on the gun to frame her for the brothers' murders. This made Diana collapse in agony. Kaylin then snatched her necklace. Just as he thought he had won, Diana secretly took the knife she had hidden and stabbed him in the leg, biting his hand before running away. A while later, Diana saw the father of the 2 brothers lying dead on the ground. She took shoes and an apple from his bag to stave off her hunger. As the sun began to set, Diana was overjoyed to discover a rope bridge across the river, which eventually led her to a dirt road. Unexpectedly, Kaylin caught up and shot her in the arm. Despite this, Diana continued walking until a passing truck hit her. The 2 young men in the truck were terrified and lifted her into the back. They soon heard a loud noise and found that one of the tires had gone flat. While changing the tire, they realized it was caused by a bullet hole. During this time, Diana took the risk of climbing into the driver's seat to escape. Kaylin finally appeared, and the 2 young men fled as he began shooting. However, Diana managed to reverse the truck, running over him. Seeing that he was still trying to get up, she decided to accelerate forward, running over him again before disappearing into the night. Eventually, Diana made it back to town, but due to her severe injuries, she collapsed. Bystanders found her and quickly called for medical assistance. However, Diana was so traumatized that she appeared insane, no longer resembling a sane person. The police therefore believed she was mentally ill and had cold-bloodedly killed Colin and the two brothers. David was furious upon hearing this, but luckily this time Tom agreed to listen to him. They decided to investigate Colin's house. Both of them broke into the locked room and discovered the bindings and a blood-stained mattress. This evidence finally brought Caitlin's crimes to light. Meanwhile, Diana gradually recovered in the hospital, but remained restrained to prevent any outbursts. Shortly after, David visited and found Rita also waiting to see Diana. Before they could talk, the police reported that Diana had gone missing after chewing through her restraints. 10 months later, Diana, now dressed beautifully, had moved to another town. She was flirting with a man in his car when she suddenly pulled out a gun and killed him. He was the 6th man she had dealt with in the past month. All of them were wanted for sexual assault. As the police began investigating the cases, they realized there was a clear pattern in the murders. They decided to assemble a special task force to track down this serial killer. Meanwhile, Diana continued her actions, becoming more sophisticated with each kill. One evening, as Diana was preparing for her next target, she received an unexpected call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was deep and authoritative. "Diana, I know who you are, and I know what you're doing. We need to talk." Diana was momentarily stunned, but quickly regained her composure. She decided to meet this man, unaware that this meeting would change her life forever. They arranged to meet at a small cafe in the outskirts. As Diana walked in, she saw a middle-aged man sitting in the corner, his eyes sharp and full of mystery. He smiled as he saw her and motioned for her to sit down. "I am John, and I have an offer for you," he said, his eyes never leaving Diana. "Would you like to work for me? I can provide you with everything you need to continue your work, but under one condition: you must follow my orders." Diana thought for a moment, then looked John straight in the eyes. "What's your condition?" John smiled, pulling out a photo from his jacket pocket and placing it on the table. It was a picture of a man, someone very familiar to Diana. "This is your first target. Let's start from here." Diana stared at the photo on the table, recognizing the man in the picture as a notorious criminal she had been watching from afar. She looked up at John, her eyes full of determination. "All right," Diana said, putting the photo into her pocket, "but I want to know why. Why did you choose me?" John smiled, a mysterious and sharp smile. "Because you have the skills and determination that few possess," he replied. "And more importantly, you have the motivation. I've been watching you for a long time, Diana. I know you're not just a killer. You have a clear goal, and I want to harness that." Diana thought about John's offer. She understood that working with him would give her many advantages, but it also meant she would have to follow his orders. "All right, I agree," she said finally. "But I have one condition. I want the freedom to choose my targets after completing the first mission." John nodded, looking satisfied. "Agreed, but remember, Diana, I am always watching you. Don't do anything that will make me regret trusting you." With the agreement reached, Diana left the cafe, preparing for her first target under John's direction. She felt the change in the air, knowing that from now on, her life would never be the same. In the following weeks, Diana began tracking her target. She gathered information, analyzing every detail of his life, from daily routines to secret relationships. When she was ready, she decided to act. Late one night, Diana approached her target in a deserted alley. With her agility and skills, she easily subdued him without making a sound. He looked at her with terrified eyes, realizing he was facing death. "This is for everything you've done," Diana whispered before taking action. With the first target completed, Diana felt a strange sense of relief. She knew this was only the beginning, and that many challenges lay ahead. But with John's support, she was ready to face anything to continue her path. Goodbye, everyone. I'm Midnight Horrors, and thank you for taking the time to watch my stories. If you enjoyed the content I shared and want to stay updated with my latest videos, please hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. This will give me more motivation to continue creating high-quality content. I am very grateful for your support and hope that we can build an amazing community together. If you have any comments or suggestions, please don't hesitate to leave them below. I really look forward to hearing from you. Thank you, and see you in the next stories.